Okay, so before we get back into this, I just want to quickly go over the vocab terms from last week. And then I want to talk briefly with you about paper 2. So I've got the assignment sheet here. Okay. So, remind me what prolepsis is.
We said prolepsis was flash forward, like
Yeah.
jump into something in the future, something like that.
Yeah, it's a flash forward in time, right? And
Yeah.
Saleems does that as a narrator, does this a lot, right? He's
Yep.
always kind of like forecasting forward to something he's going to talk about later. All right, good. What about the indirect kiss? What's the indirect kiss?
I can't remember the clip that you showed us, but indirect kiss is like they don't physically kiss to lips to lips. They kiss something else, and then their lips touch that something else.
Yeah, it's this kind of metaphorical or indirect sexual contact in a film, right? And what's the purpose of this? Why did this exist in Indian film?
I guess they didn't want to make it sexual or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there were state purity laws. Yeah, that forbade that kind of physical contact on screen, right? And what does it have to do with Midnight's Children? What claim does Saleem make about the indirect kiss? Okay, he claims that his uncle Hanif invented it, right? That he actually put it on screen for the first time.
But it's not physically true. Who actually created the indirect kiss?
I don't know enough about Indian cinema to know that, but we do know that Hanif Aziz is not a real person.
Yeah.
So it wasn't him.
But that'd be interesting.
Yeah. All right, so Bombay / Mumbai.
Mumbai. I know the time frame was 1994, but
Yeah, that's the year when Bombay becomes Mumbai. So well after this novel is published, right?
okay, but that's not.
Okay, so Bombay is a major Indian city. It was one of the centers of British administration in India, and it is now a cosmopolitan city built on a series of islands. And much of that, like the bay that it was once situated on, is now kind of covered up by concrete, which actually relates to these tetrapods. Do you remember what the tetrapods were?
I remember a little bit, but I wasn't in the room for the full conversation. I left out the room. But what I have, it's the pointed finger, so like the pointed fingers that like the line
Okay.
3 things.
It is kind of like a pointing finger.
Yeah.
Yeah, these kind of these structures, right? It's 3 legs and then a post standing up, and they support concrete platforms. And yeah, these are the things that Dr. Narlikar and Ahmed Sinai invest in, right? They're going to participate in this land reclamation to kind of connect the islands in Bombay. And it's the tetrapod because it looks like phallus is what's being worshipped by those Hindu women who are Shiva worshippers, and it's what ends up killing Dr. Narlikar, right? He's crushed to death by it as they chase him away from it. All right, an unreliable narrator.
A narrative you can't trust, a narrative who undermine knowingly or unknowingly his or her narrative.
Yes, particularly the latter thing, right? A narrator who undermines his or her own narrative. And we see that, because Saleem is constantly, fudging both his motives and the dates on which things happen, that we can't regard his notion of reality here as entirely trustworthy. I'm gonna introduce an idea for thinking about this, another way of thinking about this today.
Okay.
All right, what was the freeze?
I know his father access was frozen, and from my notes it said landowner were frozen, but I don't know.
Yeah, the Indian government in the 1950s briefly froze all the assets of some prominent wealthy Muslims. And apparently, Ahmed Sinai is one of the lucky chosen ones, right? And this is like his lack of available funds is kind of metaphorically represented by his frozen genitals as well, right? So like he becomes impotent, and apparently his genitals also become extremely cold to the touch. So, you know, as with everything in this novel, something that actually happens in Indian history also is metaphorically or allegorically expressed somehow by Saleem's family. And the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, now we can connect this to the unreliable narrator thing, right?
Yes, because like during the movie, I think it was when the movie, and then the guy, can't remember who made the announcement, but they said they made the announcement of him being assassinated, but he wasn't reliable on that one, so actually tells.
So this is one of those places where Saleem's historical timeline falls apart, right? He remembers this happening on the same day that his Uncle Hanif's first movie premiered, but when he checks the dates, right, it can't have happened on the same day. Like they don't coincide.
The mind is a tricky thing.
Indeed. All right, analepsis. Flashback, yeah. So just as Saleem is often flashing forward, like forecasting things he's going to talk about later, he is also often making connections backwards, right? Like, oh, you know, this is just like that other thing that happened to me, you know, when blah, 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 right? And one of the interesting things about this is that, like, he often kind of connects these chains for us. All right, Dr. Suresh Narlikar. Who was Dr. Narlikar?
He was an OBGYN.
Yes.
Who hates women and children.
Yes. He's an OBGYN. He delivers Saleem. He hates women and children. And he's killed by the tetrapod, which he sees as a symbol of progress. But this is also a symbol of the god of procreation and destruction, right? And so that's what happens to good old Narlikar.
You got me observed. How you gonna be an OBGYN and hate women and children?
Well,
make it make sense.
All right, the partition of India. What's this?
I don't think I have remembrance.
Okay. This coincides with Saleem's birthday, right?
Yeah.
August 15th, 1947. This is the day that India is declared independent from Britain. It is also the day in which India and Pakistan are split into separate nations, right? So that's why it's referred to as the partition, not just independence. And this is one of those first crack-ups in the narrative, right? One of the first evidences of cracks in Saleem, right? So Saleem is kind of writing himself as a kind of allegory of India. And he's regarding the nation that he represents as kind of cracked from the beginning, right? Because it's been broken into pieces already. And we'll talk about a couple more of those little partitions and fault lines today.
Okay.
But I do want to just quickly look at the paper 2 assignment. And then we will get back into Midnight's Children. Okay. So this is going to be a 3-part assignment, right? You're going to do an annotated bibliography, 5 secondary sources. You are going to do a 500-word proposal, and then a 2,000 to 3,000 word paper. You're going to choose one text to analyze for this assignment. It can't be the text you wrote paper 1 about. So any other text we looked at over the course of the semester. And you're just going to make an argument about the way in which this text deals with some larger theme that we've talked about in the course. So I'm assuming by now you've probably done an annotated bibliography, right?
Yeah, you summarize what the links are, basically. Like that, you have the links, and you read, of course, the links yourself, and then you come up with your own analysis from it. So you're making a summary about what you read.
Yeah, it's essentially what you're doing is you're demonstrating that you read and thought about the sources, right? Before you start writing the paper.
Yeah.
That's the big that's like the big thing that I want you to be doing with the reason I want you to do the annotated bibliography before anything else, right? Is I want you to do the research part of this first and let the argument grow out of the research. So of course, like you're going to have an idea, right? You're going to have a theme you want to discuss. But, yeah, I want you to do the research first. What were you going to say?
I was like, well, it says the proposal, then annotated video.
Yeah, but the due dates are listed here on the next to last page. The annotated bibliography is due first. So that'll be due on the 28th of April, which is a Friday. The proposal is going to be just like a little, much like you did for paper 1, right? Just like a little 500-word abstract of the basic argument. That's going to be due on May 1st, and the final paper will be due on May 4th, which is about as much time as I can give you to do this while still getting grades in on time.
Yeah, because grades are due the 15th of May.
What's that?
The grades are due the 15th of May, aren't they?
Before that, I think.
My teacher, when he goes to research paper, he said that the grades are due like 15th, I think.
Yeah, I'll double check on that. I may be able to give you a little bit more time to finish this, but okay.
This is 2,000 words.
Yeah, so what that'll end up being is about like 8 or 9. This will end up being about 8 or 9 pages double spaced. You know, remember too, you'll be quoting not only from the primary text that you're talking, but also from secondary sources.
Yeah.
So you know, this is it's not as huge an undertaking as it might sound.
No, I might need some help on that one.
Yeah, and you know, and I'm absolutely happy to help. Okay, so just a couple of quick things. So as far as the sources are concerned, right? No Google sources, right? So everything has to come from the library. Online source, you can use sources that come from the library databases, journal articles, things like that. But yeah, just nothing that you get from like a random Google search. No Wikipedia, you know, nothing of that nature. So let's see. Do you have any questions about any of this?
Not at the moment. And it might pop up later.
Okay. I do want to just sort of draw attention here to the thing just above the due dates here too. So I don't think this will be a problem for you, but it makes me nuts.
With the today's
Yeah, when people just write things like in today's society or back in the day, right? So yeah, like I promise that for every time I see either of those faces in your paper, after I'm dead, I will haunt you for a year, right? So if you use it 4 times, I'm going to haunt you for 4 years. Okay. So you can take some time over the weekend to look that over. Come back to me with any questions you have. And yeah, I'm happy to give you whatever help you need. Now, I do want to briefly revisit something that we were talking about at the beginning of the semester and occasionally come back to, at least once with just about every text that we've discussed. This notion of abrogation and appropriation. So do you remember what these terms mean?
I know one of them was like they would actually break from their native language to write in the standard English, and the other one, they would refuse to, but keep writing in the native language that they're used to.
Yeah, so the latter thing that you mentioned there is abrogation, right? You abrogate, the colonizer's dialect in order to write in your own native mode, right? Appropriation is taking the colonizer's language and in some way making it your own, right? Adapting it so that it is appropriate for your particular cultural situation. So I've distributed here a short piece that Rushdie wrote in 1983, or published in 1983 anyway, a couple of years after Midnight's Children came out. So these are Rushdie's thoughts on the English language and its role in Indian literature and culture, right? So one thing I want to make clear is that these are Rushdie's opinions, not my own, right? I don't know that I have the right to have an opinion on the use of English language or the English language in Indian literature or culture, right? But here's what he has to say about this, right? So he says, I'll begin from an obvious starting place. English is by now the world language. It achieved this status partly as a result of the physical colonization of a quarter of the globe by the British, and it remains ambiguous but central to the affairs of just about all the countries to whom it was given, along with mission schools, trunk roads, and the rules of cricket, as a gift of the British colonizers. But its present-day preeminence is not solely, perhaps even primarily, the result of the British legacy. It is also the effect of the primacy of the United States of America in the affairs of the world. This second impetus towards English could be termed a kind of linguistic neocolonialism, or just plain pragmatism on the part of many of the world's governments and educationists, according to your point of view. So let's just pause for a minute and unpack these first two paragraphs, right? So, what is he saying about how English got to be, quote unquote, the global language? What was step one?
Is she its status partly as a result of physical colonization of a quarter of the globe by the British?
Yeah.
It remained ambiguous by central to affairs just about the country to whom it was given, along with missions, schools, trunk roads, and all that stuff.
Yeah, so it's part of this pile of stuff, right, that the British, through forcibly taking over 25% of the Earth's surface, bequeathed to all of the nations they colonized, right? And let's just kind of break these things up for a second. So we've got language, mission schools, trunk roads, and cricket. So this, for Rushdie, is the legacy of the British Empire, right? What do you notice about these four things? Like, what do you make out of this list? Do you see any connection?
I mean, mission school and language seem like they have a connection to each other.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, what is he saying about like the primary language of instruction, at least for upper class Indians?
English?
Yeah. But if it's a mission school also, what else does that tell you about it?
They have a mission to I forget my point now.
Try to think of it this way. What kinds of organizations tend to fund missions or send out missionaries?
The government.
Not the government. Who sends out missionaries?
Assassins?
Churches.
Oh.
So yeah, these mission schools are Church of England schools. In fact, right, Saleem Sinai goes to one, right? He goes to the cathedral school in Bombay. So, along with language, right, you're also being expected to absorb British religion and a certain amount of culture, right? One thing Saleem tells us is that like all of the boys go to cathedral, even though they're mostly Muslim or Hindu, because they don't want to do a double period of Mr. Zagalo's geography class, right? So they're getting this education in British religion, even if it's a religion they don't follow. And what about cricket?
We're talking about the inset,
The sport.
Like the sport. It's a lot of different cricket, so we're talking about the inset of the sport.
Yeah, and I think this is maybe one of those that's a little bit more difficult for us because cricket didn't catch on in the U.S. We've got baseball instead, which is very similar, and it's probably derived from cricket. But in the rest of the English-speaking world, cricket is insanely popular, right? Like I remember my first job was at a publishing company, and the guy who ran the copy room downstairs was Pakistani, and he was a huge cricket fan, right? He had like posters of Pakistani cricket players all over his office.
I would have still thought the inset still.
What's that?
I would have still thought the inset. You make an inset like the bug that get hit for trucks on the road. Because everybody hit bugs when they're driving.
But I think what he's trying to get at here is just like the extent to which, British dominance left behind this kind of these institutions that are, on the one hand, actually incredibly serious, and in some cases, just these kind of like entertainment institutions as well, right? So, in addition to schools, they also left behind a sport that a lot of people here happen to like. And then, as for myself, I don't think it is always necessary to take up the anti-colonial, or is it post-colonial, cudgels against English. What seems to me to be happening is that those peoples who were once colonized by the language are now rapidly remaking it, domesticating it, becoming more and more relaxed about the way they use it. Assisted by the English language's enormous flexibility and size, they are carving out large territories for themselves within its frontiers. To take the case of India, only because it's the one with which I'm most familiar. The debate about the appropriateness of English in post-British India has been raging ever since 1947. But today, I find it is a debate which has meaning only for the older generation. The children of independent India seem not to think of English as being irredeemably tainted by its colonial provenance. They use it as an Indian language, as one of the tools they have to hand. I am simplifying, of course, but the point is broadly true. There is also an interesting north-south divide in Indian attitudes to English. In the north, in the so-called Hindi belt, where the capital, Delhi, is located, it is possible to think of Hindi as a future national language. But in South India, which is at present suffering from the attempts of central government to impose this national language on it, the resentment of Hindi is far greater than of English. After spending some time in South India, I've become convinced that English is an essential language in India, not only because of its technical vocabularies and the international communication which it makes possible, but also simply to permit two Indians to talk to each other in a tongue which neither party hates. So, why does Rushdie seem to think English is actually a good and necessary thing in Indian culture?
Because of the technical vocabularies and the intentional communication.
Okay, yeah, enables international communication, sure.
English is very, I want to say it's complex with English because like, you would type English for me, you need the old English, the new English, the modern English, it's all different types of English too.
Yeah.
And I see why he said it's like essential because of like, it is the technical vocabularies and the communication to make it possible.
Yeah, but I think like if we're talking just about like kind of maybe within India itself, what do we remember maybe about India from conversations we had maybe when we started this novel about language in India?
A month ago since she started it.
Yeah, this is a long book.
Yes, it is. Excruciatingly long. Governments are so bad. No, we need to read verse like I see on that one. I had no clue. Oh, that's not talking about that book. Wrong story.
Okay, so I just want to maybe draw your attention quickly to what happens from about page 216 to 219, right, where Saleem is riding his bike trying to impress Evie Burns, right? And down in the streets, there are these dueling protest marches going on, right? We've got these two groups, the Samyukta Maharashtra Samiti, and the Maha Gujarat Parishad. Now, these were real protest movements. They hated each other, and what they were both advocating for was a particular language, right? So, the Samiti were arguing for Marathi to be the official language of the state of Bombay. Their rivals in the Maha Gujarat Parishad were Gujarati speakers who wanted their language to be the official language of the state. So what ends up happening on May 1st, 1960, after several clashes and one protest in which several of the SNS protesters are shot by police, Bombay State or the old Bombay state, is partitioned into two states, Maharashtra for Marathi speakers, and Gujarat for Gujarati speakers. Yes. And what Saleem is recalling here is one of these protests in the late 50s, where these two groups are coming up against one another and threatening one another, right? So, if we look on page 218, right? Hands grabbing handlebars as I slow down the impassioned throng. Smiles filled with good teeth surround me. They are not friendly smiles. Look, look, a little lad sahib comes down to join us from the big rich hill. In Marathi, which I hardly understand, it's my worst subject at school, and the smile's asking, you want to join SMS, little princeling? And I, just about knowing what's being said, but dazed into telling the truth, shake my head no. And the smiles, oh ho, the young Nawab does not like our tongue, what does he like? And another smile. Maybe Gujarati? You speak Gujarati, my lord? But my Gujarati was as bad as my Marathi. I only knew one thing in the marshy tongue of Kathiawar. And the smiles urging and the fingers prodding, speak, little master, speak some Gujarati. So I told them what I knew, a rhyme I learned from Glandy Keith Kalako at school, which he used when he was bullying Gujarati boys. A rhyme designed to make fun of the speech rhythms of the language. How are you? I am well. I'll take a stick and thrash you to hell. A nonsense, a nothing, 9 words of emptiness. But when I'd recited them, the smiles began to laugh. And then voices near me and then further and further away began to take up my chant, how are you? I am well. And they lost interest in me. Go with your bicycle, Master G, they scoffed. I'll take a stick and thrash you to hell. I fled away up the hillock as my chant rushed forward and back, up to the front and down to the back of the 2-day-long procession, becoming, as it went, a song of war. That afternoon, the head of the procession of the Samyukta Maharashtra Samiti collided at Kemp's Corner with the head of a Maha Gujarat Parishad demonstration. SMS voices chanted, Suche Saruche, and MGP throats were open in fury. Under the posters of the Air India Raja and of the Kalainos Kid, the two parties fell upon one another with no little zeal, and to the tune of My Little Rhyme, the first of the language riots got underway, 15 killed, over 300 wounded. In this way, I became directly responsible for triggering off the violence which ended with the partition of the state of Bombay, as a result of which the city became the capital of Maharashtra. So at least I was on the winning side. So yeah, so he is placing himself at the center of a historical event again, right? But what's important about this historical event? Like, what's this disagreement based on?
I like it's one of the wars against what native language should be a part of the United States, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why do these two groups hate each other?
Is it the British and what's the other? Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the British, right? Not this time, no. Right? Yeah, the British are gone for a decade at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they speak different languages.
Mm-hmm.
They hate speakers of the other language. So this conflict is rooted in linguistic bigotry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Rushdie's essay suggests that English, adapted for use in India, can get around these kinds of linguistic bigotries, right? I'm not sure I agree with that particular standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
but the novel seems to be really concerned about these various cracks and fractures in the history of modern India, right?
Mhm.
There's the partition of India and Pakistan, and this is another one of those historical breaking points, right?
Mhm.
You know, Saleem keeps saying he's cracking up. And if we apply what Rushdie writes in this essay to what's happening in the novel, he seems to be perhaps arguing that if both sides had agreed to use an English language adapted for Indian circumstances, the language riots may not have happened, and the partition of the state of Bombay might have been avoided. Yeah, there seems to be like a great deal of anxiety about partitioning in general throughout the book. And I think like this is the other concept I wanted to introduce you to today. Is so like Rushdie is himself was raised Muslim, right? But there's a concept in Hindu and Buddhist thought that comes up a lot in the book. Sometimes it's directly mentioned, and other times just sort of hinted at. But the concept is the idea of what's called Maya. So I'm going to assume from the look on your face that this is something you've not heard of before, right?
I'm thinking of the name.
Okay, yeah. So Maya is the veil of illusion that keeps human beings from glimpsing truth or Brahman. So Brahman is absolute, constant, and unchanging. Maya is fickle, changeable, and contingent. And this world of changeable objects is just an illusion, right? That covers up this true constant world, if that makes sense. It's actually, the concept is pretty similar. I don't know, like, have you been exposed to Plato at all?
Plato and Gorgias and stuff like that?
Yeah, Plato, the Greek philosopher, yeah.
Yeah, we talked about him a little bit in rhetoric.
Yeah.
A little bit in literary theory, but not
Mhm.
fully, because he planted some past games and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so Plato's basic view of reality, right, is that ideas are more real than things are. Right? Everything in the physical world is just a pale imitation of some ideal form. So, like, we have this table here, this real physical table, which is just an imitation of an idea of a table, right? That can be replicated endlessly, but is always going to be somehow inferior. And where human beings screw up, according to Plato, is mistaking, that ephemeral world of objects for the thing that's really important and really true, when really it's the ideas that lie behind objects that are the higher reality. The idea of this kind of Maya and Brahman idea is kind of similar, right? And I think that a lot of Saleem Sinai's story is about these kinds of seeming, these illusions that are pulled over the truth, and either, and often believed for matters of convenience, right? So, like, Saleem Sinai is himself not who he thinks he is, or who his parents think he is. He is actually the son fathered by William Methwald on A Street Singer's Wife. Shiva, his counterpart, is the actual biological son of Ahmed and Amina Sinai. And so Saleem is living the life that Shiva should have lived, and Shiva is living the life that Saleem should have lived, right? And yeah. In another one of those kind of like indirect, like the indirect kiss thing is also kind of illusion, right? That is, it's a kind of sleight of hand, masking the thing that you're really referring to. And even like, Mary Pereira switching the babies at birth, she does it because she's in love with this socialist activist, Joe DaCosta, and she thinks that giving a poor baby a chance at a better life is an act of affection towards him, right?
I think there's a show, like an actual TV show called Switched at Birth too. I think it's like modern TV or something. I can't remember the actual TV program, but I remember it back then. I just never watched it.
Yeah, just knowing that exists just made me feel a little bit stupider. So.
Some people do that. It's like, why? Like, does it matter? Why? Just why?
Well, I imagine that like in the rare instances where it does happen, it probably happens by accident. Like just the hospital screws up. And they put the wrong nameplate by the way. And it's only like, and really for in Saleem's case, right? It's only discovered because of a blood test.
Yeah.
When it's found that his blood type doesn't match either of his parents.
But the doctor delivered him, so how did he not figure that out though?
Well, the doctor was, the babies are swish wings not looking, right?
Yeah. He didn't do his job right. Because he don't like kids and children. I mean, like kids and women, so like, yeah.
But yes, and we see like Saleem as somebody who creates like we got all these people in the narrative who create these kind of illusory stories about themselves, right? So there's this this cruel teacher in Saleem's school, this guy Emil Zagalo, who doesn't have a drop of actual European blood, but pretends to be Portuguese, right? And lords his Europeanness over the boys that he teaches. So let's go to Zagalo here for a second here. Page 262. The first mutilation of Saleem Sinai, which was rapidly followed by the second, took place one Wednesday early in 1958, the Wednesday of the much anticipated social, under the auspices of the Anglo-Scottish Education Society. That is, it happened at school. Saleem's assailant, handsome, frenetic, with a barbarian shaggy mustache. I present the leaping, hair-tearing figure of Mr. Emil Zagalo, who taught us geography and gymnastics, and who that morning, unintentionally, precipitated the crisis of my life. Zagalo claimed to be Peruvian, and was fond of calling us jungle Indians bead lovers. He hung a print of a stern, sweaty soldier in a pointy tin hat and metal pantaloons above his blackboard, and had a way of stabbing a finger at it in times of stress and shouting, "You see him, you savages? This man is civilization. You show him respect. He's got a sword." And he'd swish his cane through the stone wall there. We called him Pagal Zagal, Crazy Zagalo, because for all his talk of llamas and conquistadors in the Pacific Ocean, we knew, with the absolute certainty of rumor, that he'd been in a Mazagoan tenement and his Goanese mother had been abandoned by a decamped shipping agent. So he was not only an Anglo, but probably a bastard as well. Knowing this, we understood why Zagalo affected his Latin accent, and also why he was always in a fury, why he beat his fist against the stone walls of the classroom, but the knowledge didn't stop us being afraid. And this Wednesday morning, we knew we were in trouble because optional cathedral had been canceled. So, Zagalo pretends to be something other than he is. For what purpose?
I guess set up his past. He don't want to be you. He don't want to be that way. He want to be something different.
Yeah, but I mean, like, what? Why in particular in front of this classroom full of boys? Like, what does he seem to think giving himself this Peruvian pedigree does for him? Right, connected like he's got that picture of a conquistador on the wall, right? Mm-hmm. And he fakes swinging a sword, and he says that the conquistador, right, this guy who goes across Central or South America, killing and subjugating natives, right? That's civilization. Why do you think he's identifying with that in front of these boys?
Because that's somebody who's powerful and strong versus how, when he was a kid, his father, well, he a bastard, as he said.
Yeah.
He doesn't know anything about his father.
Exactly, yeah, it's a show of strength, or it's a show of power.
It is so.
Right. In a culture that still on some level values European connections more than Native Indian connections, right? Mm-hmm. Remember, I mean, like this is, you know, this boys' school that they attended it's a British style school. This gives him, he feels more authority, right? Mm-hmm. And also yelling and waving a cane probably makes them afraid of him.
Will be scared of like
yeah.
a teacher or somebody who's just swinging a cane. Like,
yeah, I mean, like I am often like even like when I heard stories about like what my father's mm-hmm. school teachers got away with. I'm like, you know, shocked and appalled by a lot of it.
Like,
teachers
are doing like stuff like that. I was like, how do they get away with that type of stuff?
My dad spent 12 years getting slapped by nuns.
How do they get away with that? And now teachers do it as an assault. I'm like,
yeah, well, they're you know, I mean, there didn't used to be laws against it. Essentially, is what it comes down to. But in this case too, like I think it's like, you know, we've got a situation here. It's like where, you know, these boys at this school they come from wealthy Indian families, right? They're wealthy enough to pay tuition, mm-hmm. except for the family of the one kid who we know is the scholarship boy. Mm-hmm. He's always marked out as such. That wealth doesn't hide the fact that they're not European, right? Mm-hmm. And that someone like Zagalo really isn't punished for, he suffers no consequences for, you know, for brutalizing these boys until he goes a little too far mm-hmm. and actually tears Saleem's hair out.
That sounds painful.
Yeah.
That is painful.
Yeah. But, I mean, we can even kind of like think about this in terms even of like the estate that Saleem lives on, right? Mm-hmm. Right, you know, the language marchers call him Little Princeling from the Hill. And yeah, the families that live on Methwald Estate are all wealthy. And they're all, it's kind of a multicultural estate as well, too. And if we look at the names, right, so we've got, you know, Sinai and Ibrahim, right, these are Muslim families. Katrak and Dubash are Parsi names.
What is Parsi?
What's that?
What is Parsi?
Parsi is it's what Zoroastrians are called in India. Zoroastrianism is the pre-Islamic religion of Iran. And Sabarmati and Narlikar are Hindu names. And up on this hill in this estate,
those are like really rich names. They kind of sound like a little bit.
yeah, well, and we know, right, Homi Katrak is a film magnate. The Ibrahims are prominent. The Ismail Ibrahim is a prominent lawyer. Professor Dubash is a physicist. Right, Commander Sabarmati is a high up naval officer. So these are people of importance and wealth, right? But yeah, we've got people of these different religious and ethnic backgrounds in this one estate, and they all adopt English habits. Right? They've all kind of maintained these English traditions that William Methwold left behind. And they live separate from the rest of the city. So there is this kind of hierarchy with people who act more European above people who don't, and people who actually are European above even them, right? Like even like at the social that Saleem attends after getting his hair ripped out, everybody wants to dance with the white girls from from the girls' school down the road, right? They're the most desirable partners.
The prime example was one of Saleem's friends wanted to ask his sister out. Brass monkey?
Yeah, at this point in the narrative, she's still referred to as the brass monkey, yeah. And her favorite thing to do is set people's shoes on fire, right?
She's narcissist.
Yeah, but like that connects back to that Ravana group, right? Those Hindu nationalists earlier in the novel who were threatening Saleem's father back when they lived in Delhi, right? These guys who burned down the warehouses owned by Muslim businessmen. And at the time, Saleem's father dealt primarily in leather. So the monkey setting people's shoes on fire is that whole thing kind of coming back, right?
Hey, at least it's better than throwing poop. So. My name is Brass Monkey, so.
Yeah, I guess so.
Do we ever know why they call her Brass Monkey, or is that just been her name since birth?
Well, her name is Jamila.
Yeah.
Right. We're told that Brass Monkey just seems to be a nickname. I think. So I think the Brass Monkey thing is associated, like a lot of the names that are in here are taken from a Hindu epic called the Ramayana. And in that epic, one of the heroes is a monkey called Hanuman, who evolves into a kind of trickster god. And so I think that the whole brass monkey thing is maybe a reference to this character from ancient Indian literature. Ravana, the demon that terrorist group is named after, is also a character in the Ramayana. He's a multi-headed demon who kidnaps Rama's wife. And I think the main reason why I think this is the reference is because they both connect back to that same epic. Okay, so one more thing I just want to kind of briefly talk about. I think it does relate to the whole what do you call it, the Maya issue, the veil of illusion thing. The whole issue of the Midnight's Children Conference. So what do we find out Saleem is able to do?
Read people's mind, and when he reads people's mind, they can actually know when he's actually reading mind. He did that by accident with Eva.
Yeah.
I think he did it on accident or on purpose, because he did say that he was trying to figure out why she don't like him.
Yeah, I mean, he does it with her because he's upset, right?
Yeah.
And he just pushes into her brain, and apparently finds a memory that's pretty disturbing.
Yeah. And he's
but
like, is that a dream or is it like a nightmare or something like that?
Yeah.
I don't remember, but he did say something to her.
But yeah, he essentially what he can do is communicate telepathically, right? So he's able to kind of reach his mind out and find all of these other children across India who were born in that first hour of the new nation's existence, right? Now, one thing that we do learn about this power is that it only works when he's in India, right?
Yep.
It does not work when he is when he goes to visit family in Pakistan. But the number of children in the conference is the same number, or is the same as the number of representatives in the Lok Sabha, the Indian Parliament, in the 1950s. And if we notice, when we look on, let's see, where the hell is he first? Find them. Well, the thing that I want to note here is that no two children, unless they're twins, have the same power, right? And none of them are from the same place. Right? So they're spread out across, or at least none of them are in the same place, right? So they're spread out across the country, like so they each represent a district. And right, he refers to them, by these districts they come from, right? So, like on page 227, we've got, Midnight's Children from Kerala, a boy who had the ability of stepping into mirrors and re-emerging through any reflective surface in the land, through lakes, and with greater difficulty, like polished metal bodies of automobiles. And a Goanese girl with the gift of multiplying fish, and children with powers of transformation, a werewolf from the Nilgiri hills, and from the great watershed of the Vindhyas, a boy who could increase or reduce his size at will, and had already, mischievously, been the cause of wild panic and rumors of the return of giants. From Kashmir, there was a blue-eyed child of whose original sex I was never certain, since by immersing herself in water, he or she could alter it as she or he pleased. Some of us called this child Narada, others Markandeya, depending on which old fairy tale of sexual change we had heard. Near Jalna, at the heart of parched Deccan, I found a water-divining youth, and a Budge outside of Calcutta, and so on and so forth, right? So he finds all these different children with very different abilities, all in different regions. And there seems to be a hierarchy among them, right? The further from that original midnight hour they were born, the less useful their powers seem to be, or kind of the more freakish. But the other thing that I want to pull out of this, and then we'll let it go. We'll pick this back up next time. Is what problem is solved by Saleem's telepathy?
Is it about Siamese twins or? We would define what a Siamese.
Think about it as a communication problem that's solved by telepathy. Maybe we can relate this to the language march that Saleem accidentally blunders into when he's trying to impress Evie. What's at issue there? Why do these two groups hate each other?
Because they have different language.
Yeah. So the telepathy thing, like English in Rushdie's essay here, right, gets around the language problem. Saleem can speak directly into the other's minds and project images directly into their minds. And they can speak kind of through him, right? So the issue of, so I mean, what this does, it means that, like, you know, well, I think, like, you know, regionalisms and class issues do ultimately pose a problem for this group. Language never really does, right? Language doesn't really come up as an issue because Saleem's telepathy creates a kind of universal language for them, right? A way they can communicate without having to speak in a language that anyone feels any particular way about. All right, so we'll leave it at that for now. I'll give you some guide questions for next time. And we'll pick it back up on Monday.